Yo, what's good everyone? We are finally back with Elbaf Part 5. Today, we're diving straight into Nika and Nidhogg versus Emu. Emu's long-awaited face reveal, their terrifying abyss powers, and even a glimpse into Emu's past with Joy Boy himself. We'll also be breaking down Emu's connection to Loki and Ragnir, along with the moment Emu finally descends into the lower world for the very first time. This chapter honestly feels less like a normal One Piece chapter and more like the beginning of Ragnarok itself. So without further ado, let's dive straight into some peak One Piece. The chapter opens with Luffy rushing over to Sanji's group. He's carrying both Usopp and Brook, both of them completely knocked out from the beating Gunko put on them last chapter. He drops them off with the crew, and immediately the group starts asking questions about what's going on. Frankie steps up and asks if they need backup going into this fight. Luffy's answer is clear: keep your distance for now. Loki is about to go all out, and having everyone pile in isn't the right call. If he needs them, he'll call. Now, over to where the actual fight is happening. While Luffy was away doing all that, Loki wasn't sitting still. He's already in his massive dragon form, massive jaws opening wide, charging up his thunder attack. And while that's happening, Emu, still possessing Gunko's body, just calmly starts talking. Emu mentions that a few years ago, a giant's ship was spotted out at sea. The captain was of truly immense stature, noticeably larger than any other giant on the crew. That ship was never properly identified because it operated deep within fog-shrouded regions, but the one consistent detail is that it only ever targeted world government ships. Then Loki fires. His thunder attack releases an enormous, deafening blast that tears through the surrounding area and causes massive destruction on impact. Luffy arrives right at this moment and catches the tail end of it happening. He shouts at Loki to wait for him, but the attack is already done, and it didn't land. Emu dodged it completely. Loki, massive as he is in dragon form, is realizing the problem. His sheer size becomes a disadvantage when fighting something as small and slippery as Emu. Emu just continues their train of thought. During that same period, they say, a number of credible rumors started to emerge about sightings of an unimaginably large flying creature in the skies. And Emu, looking directly at Loki, says they can clearly see how that one checks out now. It was Loki. They've known about him. Luffy at this point has heard enough. He starts charging at Emu at full speed, ready to take revenge for what was done to his crewmates. But before he can reach Emu, something shifts. A massive black shadow begins pouring out of Gunko's body, towering over both Luffy and Loki at the same time. The exact same form that appeared at God Valley, with two massive shadowy tendrils extending outward. The same shadow that performed Domi Reversi on rocks. Emu speaks. They say that if only Luffy and Loki could both be erased from this world as easily as Rocks was. And then they act on it. The two tendrils shoot out and pierce both Luffy and Loki simultaneously. This is Domi Reversi. Emu begins the ritual. In exchange for a portion of their lifespan, they will receive power beyond human limits. Emu calls out the technique. But nothing happens. Absolutely nothing. The tendrils hit, the technique activates, and both Luffy and Loki just shake them off. Luffy looks more annoyed than hurt. Loki looks more confused than shaken. He immediately starts demanding to know what Emu meant by mentioning rocks. He wants answers. And Emu, interestingly, doesn't look entirely shocked that it didn't work. They seem like they already suspected these two might be immune to Domi Reversi. They're actually about to offer an explanation for why, but Luffy doesn't wait around for that. Luffy goes straight into Dawn Gatling, a rapid barrage of punches driving directly into Emu's shadow form. While Luffy is hammering away, Loki realizes his disadvantage with the massive dragon form and reverts from his massive dragon form back into his colossal giant humanoid form and grabs Ragnir, shifting it into the mode that channels his freezing abilities. He shouts at Luffy to move. Then he brings it down, Niflheim, a massive freezing attack that hits Emu and Gunko both at once, and it works. The entire black shadow mass, Emu's form and Gunko along with it, gets completely encased in a giant block of ice. Everything goes still. Luffy, for his part, is actually a little frustrated about this. He wanted to be in on that final hit too, and Loki just went straight to his most powerful technique and ended it in one shot. But before Luffy can complain too much about it, the Gear 5 withdrawal kicks in. he deflates right back into the classic old man form. Loki glances down at Emu and admits he doesn't fully understand what they are, but adds that he was getting exhausted from staying in his giant form for that long anyway. Going for the quick finish made more sense given the circumstances. The chapter then pulls back and starts checking in across the rest of Elbaf. Over in the western village, Zoro has been working alongside the giant warrior pirates to undo the Domi Reversi corruption on the infected giants. They've already turned the vast majority of them back to normal. Zoro has his eyes on the last two remaining demon giants when Chopper comes running in, and Chopper just hits them. One move. Both of them instantly snap back to normal. The dark shadow peels away from their bodies. The ground beneath them flips like that same Domi Reversi visual but in reverse. And just like that, they're back. Chopper, clearly proud of himself, starts running towards Zoro, calling out to him with that big, cheerful energy. Zoro just stares at him. He asks how that even worked. Chopper doesn't really have a clean answer. He doesn't fully understand why his hits are purifying the Domi Reversi corruption specifically. He just knows they are, and he's visibly happy about it. Zoro thinks on it for a moment and lands on the simplest possible explanation. Chopper is probably just a great doctor. The giants standing around them nod in complete and genuine agreement. Hadruddin steps forward and asks for a full status report. What's the situation island-wide? The answer he gets is that there are no more visible enemies on the field. Every village appears clear. The remaining problem is the fire still spreading across Elbaf. Priority is getting the flames out, and also physically confirming whether all the demons are actually gone, because with opponents this powerful, you do not assume. Now, over to the Owl Library. Robin and Saul finally arrive. They walk through the doors and find nothing. Every single shelf is completely empty, not burned, just gone, and Biblo isn't there either. The entire collection and the owl that guarded it have vanished without a single trace. Robin holds on to the hope that maybe Biblo managed to get the books out before the fire reached the library. But even if that's the best case scenario, it immediately raises the question of where Biblo went with all of it, and whether anyone is going to see those books again. Cut to Sanji's group. Sanji looks around at the state of Elbaf and remarks that once they actually started fighting back, things came under control pretty fast. Frankie agrees, but makes a point of stepping back and looking at the bigger picture. What they went up against wasn't a full-scale military operation from a major organization. It was 3 holy knights. 3 people. And those 3 people threw an entire giant civilization into total chaos, lit half the island on fire, corrupted an army of giants, nearly took out multiple Straw Hats, and put Elbaf on the back foot completely. 3 individuals did all of that. That's the kind of threat level the Holy Knights are operating at, and everyone should be aware of it. Meanwhile, Killingham can no longer sense Emu's presence from where he is. He quietly starts wondering what happened to the Great One. On that note, we get a brief and genuinely unsettling update from outside the western village. Summers, who went down earlier, is on the ground in rough shape. He's been reduced to just his severed head and his heart, but he's alive, and he's slowly, painfully pulling himself back together, reattaching piece by piece. The detail that gets flagged here is that Summers apparently doesn't have a human heart. Whatever is underneath that Holy Knight exterior isn't entirely human. Back with Luffy and Loki, Luffy, still in his drained old man form, looks up at Loki and tells him he's hungry. He wants food. Loki stares down at him and says, if he's hungry, go back to the village. It's not like he carries food around with him. He also takes a moment to ask about this sudden weird old man look that Luffy has going on, clearly not understanding what Gear 5 withdrawal looks like. Luffy, not really answering that, then turns to Ragnir and asks Ragnir for food instead. And then, inside that massive block of ice, completely unnoticed by anyone on Elbaf, Emu's shadow body quietly fades. The darkness just dissolves away from inside the ice. Just gone. Cut to the Holy Land, Pangaea Castle. Emu contacts the 5 elders directly. The message is short and simple. Emu tells the 5 elders that they will be leaving the Holy Land for a short while. The 5 elders are surprised. Emu is no longer going to be operating through someone else's body. They are personally leaving the seat of power for the first time in this entire story. The chapter opens in the Holy Land. The 5 elders are visibly on edge. Warkari and Jupiter speak up first, nervously asking if the Great One is really going to Elbaf, if Emu is truly planning to descend to the lower realm himself. They're urging him to reconsider. But before the conversation can go anywhere, Garling walks in, and right away, he's operating on a completely different frequency from the rest of them. While the elders are anxious and careful with their words, Garling is just blunt. He tells the room flat out, there is no more time for idleness. The Holy Land cannot endure these conditions any longer. They have to act, and they have to act now. Then he lays out the full picture. Shamrock's return to the Holy Land has stabilized the immediate situation there. Whatever chaos was happening has been brought under control for now. But the bigger problem is still very much unresolved. The Revolutionary Army's starvation tactic is working. The supply routes from the lower world are being cut off, and the celestial dragons, the people at the very top of the world, the ones who have never had to worry about a single meal in their lives, are starting to go hungry. Garling says their priority needs to be rallying the military strength required to reassert global dominance, including the former Navy headquarters. Right on cue, York calls in, and she is furious. She's demanding to know where her food is, saying this is not what was agreed upon, and that this is absolutely not how a celestial dragon is supposed to live. Garling's response is cold and completely to the point. He explains the food shortage to her. He tells her that only one thing can break this deadlock, the Mother Flame. If she truly wants to live like a celestial dragon, she needs to produce it, and fast. He also brings up the rumors, reminding her that her main body, the original Vegapunk, may be aligned with this very rebellion. He tells her to consider this her penance for that. Then he hangs up. The irony here is brutal. York betrayed her entire crew to eat well and live in luxury at the top of the world, and she arrived at exactly the moment that world started collapsing from the inside. Garling makes one more observation before the topic shifts. He says everything started going wrong the moment Nika resurfaced. Was it all just a coincidence, or was it always going to end up here? Then Jupiter steers things back to the main argument, pushing back on Emu leaving. They say the admirals should be the ones to handle Elbaf. Emu should not be leaving the castle under any circumstances. Nustro counters that the admirals are already stretched thin, managing the Revolutionary Army, dealing with Cross-Guild. There's a lot going on at once. Then, Warkari suggests the elders descend themselves, the same way they did on Egghead. Emu shuts all of it down. He tells the 5 elders to set aside their arrogance, their sloth, their estrangement, and their pride. Emu notes that it was all inevitable. What follows is a sequence of flashbacks, a look through Emu's eyes at every major event that brought things to this point. It starts with the God Valley incident, 38 years ago, facing Rox D. Zebek, the only time the Room of Flowers was ever invaded, which we saw back in chapter 1155. Then Roger's execution, 24 years ago. Roger standing on the platform, laughing, telling the entire world the One Piece is real, go find it. The moment that set everything into motion. He remembers learning about Shirahoshi's birth, meaning the ancient weapon Poseidon had returned in the current era. He remembers learning that Shanks stole the Nika fruit. We still don't fully know what Emu's original plan for that fruit was, but it clearly mattered enormously. Only a handful of people in the world even knew what it truly was. Then there's the report about Harold's presence before the elders. And before 6 years ago, reports about Loki's rampages across the seas, and confirmation that this dangerous dragon prince was Harold's son. The memory then shifts to the Paramount War, Whitebeard's death. Emu watches and wonders why Whitebeard protected him. When he says him, he means Luffy. He watches the strongest man in the world die for a kid he barely knew, and finds himself asking about both Monkey D., Luffy, and the man who took Whitebeard's power afterward, Marshall D., Teach, Blackbeard. And then we get the reverie scene. Cobra telling Emu the real name of Lily, Emu in the Room of Flowers, shredding the photos, Luffy, Blackbeard, Vivi, Shirahoshi. The people Emu marked are described as carrying inherited wills, specifically pointing out that Luffy and Blackbeard carry the wills of Joy Boy and Davy Jones. 2 figures from 800 years ago now walking the earth again in new forms. Emu felt haunted by the sense that fate had been setting all of this in motion long before he could do anything to stop it. The memory ends on Vivi. Emu stares at a portrait of her ancestor, Nefertari D. Lily. There's clearly a history between Imu and that lineage. All of this leads to one conclusion. It was always going to come to this. Imu has to face it himself. He walks toward a giant abyss pentagram located somewhere inside the Room of Flowers. The 5 elders make one final attempt. 3 of them, Warcury, Jupiter, and Mars, are firmly against it. Warcury specifically warns Imu that if Imu leaves Pangaea Castle, something will happen to him. It's not a vague warning. It's clear that the Holy Land, and specifically Pangaea Castle, has something to do with keeping Imu stable or at full strength. Newsjuro quietly acknowledges there's no point in reminding Imu of this. Imu already knows, he just doesn't care. Garling says it plainly, no one has the authority to stop him. And so, Imu steps into the abyss and vanishes. The weight of this moment is significant. By leaving Pangaea, Imu is voluntarily surrendering whatever protection the Holy Land provides him. We cut to Elbaf, and for a moment, the chapter breathes a little. Gerd and Goldberg have captured Summers and bring him over to Hodgeruden and Zoro. Summers has been completely cut in half and tied up with rope. Gerd is holding his 2 separated halves and watching as the parts actively try to pull back toward each other like magnets. She says out loud that it's creepy. Summers, despite being literally split in 2 and completely humiliated, still has enough attitude left to fire back that she's the scary one. Then Goldberg presents something even more interesting, Summers' heart, and it's made of steel. Zoro looks at it and immediately cuts to the point. He wonders out loud, if that steel heart gets destroyed, does Summers die permanently? The moment he says it, Summers reacts. His expression shifts, and actual fear shows up on his face for the first time. That reaction alone says everything. Zoro is probably right. The steel heart is likely what keeps the Holy Knights and Chosen Ones so difficult to put down for good. Not far away, Sanji has handled killing him. He completely dismantled the man, separated his legs, his torso, and his head so the parts can't reconnect, and hung all 3 sections from a tree. Killingham is furious. He tells Sanji he will never forget his name, and demands that Sanji remember his. Sanji says he already forgot it. Meanwhile, Frankie is watching over the unconscious Usopp and Brook. Neither of them is in good shape. Frankie handles the tension by offering to patch them both up as cyborgs. Meanwhile, Jinbei is actively out looking for Chopper. No word yet on where he has wandered off to. Meanwhile, Gunko remains encased in ice. She is still completely unconscious, and it's unclear whether she is alive or not. Over at the Walrus School, Luffy, Loki, and Ragnir have shown up looking for food. The problem is that Lilith's Omni-Drain converters, the machines she used to freeze the area earlier, also froze every single food provision inside the school. Every last thing is solid ice. It is completely tasteless. The 3 of them eat it anyway, because they're hungry and there's nothing else. Luffy, even in his completely worn-down post-Gear 5 state, immediately starts thinking about getting food over to Usopp and Brook. Loki tells him he should probably focus on recovering himself first, which is completely reasonable advice that Luffy is not going to follow. Then Luffy asks Loki directly, "Is Gunko dead in that ice?" Loki says no. It was a flash freeze, so she survived it. But the only one who can thaw Ragnir's ice is Ragnir himself. Nobody else can undo it, so she is not going anywhere for now. And then everything changes. Nami spots something in the distance, toward Orist Castle. Something is very wrong. First, one massive pillar of black energy erupts from the sky and crashes down in front of the castle. Then, another, and another. Multiple pillars start raining down from different locations across the area. The people of Elbaf notice. Everyone notices. And we see the full scale. 5 massive pillars of black energy slam down around Orist Castle simultaneously, as a massive abyssal pentagram forms in the sky. The dark energy wraps around the castle and immediately begins affecting everything nearby. The trees come to life. The buildings start warping and twisting. Everything in the area begins making noise and distorting into demonic shapes with twisted faces, like the environment itself is being corrupted just by whatever is arriving. It's reminiscent of Big Mom's soul ability, except no one is directing it. It's happening on its own, automatically, as a reaction. But that's not all. A drumbeat begins to play, similar to the drums of liberation that echo when Luffy transforms into Nika. This time, however, it's the opposite. Instead of liberation, these are drums of domination, an ominous rhythm announcing the arrival of an approaching figure. Then a sixth pillar slams straight down into the dead center of the castle. The force of it releases a wave of Supreme King Haki that sweeps across everything in range. Several giant children are knocked out on the spot. Zoro is one of the first to sense it clearly, and Chopper is right there beside him. Both of them feel the heavy pressure of this Haki. Over at the Walrus School, Luffy and Loki also witness the chaos erupting from the direction of the castle. Loki asks, "Is this the same Haki as before?" Inside Orist Castle, inside the throne room, Emu materializes. He appears at the summoning spot, inside the magic circle. The moment he arrives, he drops to his knees and coughs up blood. Dark blood. It's deep, possibly black. He's trembling. Whatever the cost of passing through the abyss from Pangaea to Elbaf, he's paying all of it right now. Before he fully transforms, a pair of dark wings begins tearing out of his body. And then the rest follows, the transformation happening while he's clearly in tremendous pain, not controlled, not composed. The force of it is so violent that it explodes straight through the roof of the castle. And then he's there, sitting on top of Orist Castle, fully visible to everyone in Elbaf, in his true form for the very first time. This is the moment. After years of shadows, silhouettes, and deliberate mystery, Oda finally shows us Emu in full. His design is unlike anything else in the series. Dark skin consistent with Lunarian heritage, long white hair, horns like those of oars and the ancient giants, but they curve twice, forming an S shape. A demonic tail, the very same one we saw piercing Sabo during the reverie, white circular tattoos across his body, and surrounding him, black Hagoromo clouds, except these ones have eyes in them. Nothing like anything we've seen from any other awakened Zoan user in this series. Then comes the official introduction box. One of the 20 founders of the world government. Special power, the Akuma no Mi, the Devil's Fruit. King of the world. Saint Nerona Emu. His power isn't named like any standard devil fruit we know. It's not the usual format. It's just listed as Devil, the Akuma no Mi, the Devil's Fruit itself. The chapter opens with a double-page spread, a full-body reveal of Emu, and the design is genuinely striking. White dots cover their entire body from head to foot. Emu doesn't look anything like a typical celestial dragon. The energy is closer to something like NL or Rox D. Zebek, pirate vibes mixed with something ancient and almost divine. Then, in basically no time, Emu jumps down from the top of Orist Castle and lands right in the middle of Western Village, standing among the giants. The first thing out of Emu's mouth is a demand. Where is the king of this country? Dory and Brogy answer him plainly. Elbaf has no king. But Emu isn't really listening, because his attention has already shifted to something else. Gerd is holding Summers in her hand, she's been keeping the Holy Night contained, and Emu has just noticed. What happens next is something nobody present can even properly describe, because nobody saw it happen. One moment Emu is standing there, and the next, the tips of Gerd's thumbs and index fingers are severed clean off. Gerd recoils in shock and pain and falls back. Summers drops free. Emu's reaction is almost offhand, like he can't believe his knight got taken down in this kind of situation. Summers, now on the ground, reaches for his steel heart and reclaims it. The crowd is furious. This is where Zoro steps in. He turns to Emu and asks if this is another Knight of God. Emu doesn't bother answering. Hadrudin, who is absolutely seething over what just happened to Gerd, doesn't care about the answer. He surges forward to attack. Stanson grabs him and shouts at him to stop, warning that they have no idea what this person is actually capable of. But even as Stanson is saying that, he spots Emu's next attack already coming. He shoves Hadrudin out of the path, which saves Hadrudin's life, but Stanson himself takes the full hit, and it costs him his right leg. Gone. The crowd is in full panic now. Because the realization is starting to settle in, this isn't just another holy night. This person might be something else entirely. That's the moment Zoro moves. He goes in with King of Hell 3-sword style, Purgatory Onigiri, a serious technique. And here is where it gets rough. Emu blocks the entire attack with the tip of his tail. Doesn't even shift his body. The tail just stops it dead. Then Emu raises his palm, and a small black flame materializes in it. This is what the chapter calls Omen. Emu fires it directly at Zoro's face. It hits like a bullet. Zoro goes down with blood on his head. Hajrudin, unable to just sit there and watch, lunges forward again with his axe. And this is where we get a better look at what's on Emu's back. It's not the regular Hagoromo clouds, it's a ring of black fire. And it has eyes in it. It's completely unlike the awakening clouds of any Zoan fruit, it just floats there behind Emu like something alive. Before Hajrudin can land his attack, Emu hits him with another Omen, but at a completely different scale. On Zoro it was a targeted shot, like a bullet to the face. On Hajrudin it becomes a full-scale explosion that throws the giant entirely off his feet. Same ability, wildly different output. Both Zoro and Hajrudin are down in an instant. Then Emu conjures another Omen, but this time instead of firing it offensively, he passes it to Summers, and Summers is immediately restored, fully. Whatever condition he was in before is just gone. The Omen ability is functioning as both a weapon and a healing tool, which makes it one of the more versatile things we've seen introduced in the series in a long time. Emu tells Summers to hurry. They can't waste time here. And there's a note worth paying attention to. The way Emu frames this suggests that spending time outside of the Holy Land is genuinely costly for him. The two split up, with Emu sending Summers off to finish the job. Meanwhile, nearby, Chopper yells at people to get inside the buildings that have reverted to normal after Emu left the area, and to gather the injured and unconscious children. Jarl is just standing there for a moment, speechless, processing what he just witnessed. Then he snaps back and sends out a warning to all of Elbaf. He announces that someone with power exceeding the Holy Knights has landed on the island. Everyone needs to stay on guard. The battle is not over. That announcement alone carries weight. The Holy Knights were already being treated as an overwhelming threat. Emu is a tier above them entirely. Then we see Emu, who has two large, black bird-like wings extending from his back and is flying through the air. The people of Elbaf hear Jarl's announcement and begin to prepare for whatever is coming next. As Emu flies, he passes over the area where Gunko is being kept, frozen solid in a block of ice by Ragnir. Emu spots the ice block. The flame at the base of his weapon transforms into a cannon-like shape, and he fires a black ball of flame, with eyes and a mouth, directly at the target, creating a massive explosion on impact. Whether Gunko actually gets freed is left unclear, because Loki had previously said that only he would be able to undo Ragnir's ice. Meanwhile, at the lift nearby, Gaben has been feeling all of this. He's been sensing Emu's haki the entire time, and his reaction says everything. Gaben, who was present at the legendary God Valley incident, says flat out that he has never felt a haki like this in his life, not even at God Valley. Now we cut to Walrus School, where Luffy, Loki, and Ragnir need food to rebuild their strength before getting back into the fight. There's a problem though, the food at the school was frozen from Ragnir's earlier ice situation. Loki tries to warm the food up and ends up charring it instead. Luffy is visibly annoyed. But Loki's response is basically, we don't have time to be picky. Both of them have already felt Emu's haki and they know exactly what's out there waiting for them. So all three of them just start shoveling down whatever burnt food they can get their hands on, because getting their strength back is the only priority right now. Back at Sanji's group, Nami arrives and asks what's going on. Jinbei tells her they don't have a full picture either, but whatever that haki was, it was terrifying. Then Emu arrives. He drops in on Sanji's group, where Killingham is being held, and Jinbei and the others immediately understand what's happening. Emu is going down the list, restoring each of his fallen Holy Knights one by one. Emu reaches Killingham, cuts his restraints, frees him, and passes him an Omen flame. Killingham is restored. And notably, Killingham's reaction to seeing the Omen is one of relief, which tells you these holy knights are fully aware of what Omen is and what it means. Sanji, watching all of this, wants to know who this new person even is. Jinbei warns him plainly, this person is dangerous, but Sanji is not standing there and letting it happen. He goes in with a heavy kick. And in the panels, you get a sense of Mu's scale. Mu is roughly in the size range of Kaido or Big Mom, somewhere around 7 to 8 meters tall. So Sanji's entire body is noticeably smaller than just Imu's foot. But Imu takes the kick, blocks it with his own leg, and counters. He kicks Sanji back with legs coated in that same black flame, and the result is an explosion that sends Sanji flying. And that's the end of Sanji's involvement in this chapter. Both of Luffy's wings are down. Zoro and Sanji, the two people in this crew most defined by holding the line and protecting Luffy, both went in without hesitation and both got swatted aside like it was nothing. Then Loki steps forward. He asks Emu what business he has on Elbaf, and Emu finally speaks with real intention. He asks who is responsible for the murder of his servant Harold, 14 years ago. Who killed him? Loki corrects Emu on the spot. Harold was not a servant. Harold was his father, the former king of Elbaf, Loki's father. And then Loki says it directly, I'm the one you're looking for. I'm the one who killed Harold. Dark clouds are gathering around Loki. Lightning is crackling. The Ragnir hammer is in hand. Emu's response is calm and cold. He says that if Loki hadn't been here, a lot of tribulation for his people could have been avoided. Loki fires back. Where else would he be, other than Elbaf? This is his home. The chapter opens up with a memory. We go inside Loki's head. He's flashing back 14 years ago, to the Orist Castle massacre. And what he remembers is his father, Harold, standing there, and calling himself the worst king in the history of Elbaf. Harold told Loki to finish him, to take the throne. Loki processes that. He thinks about how Harold was only 144 years old when he died. Giants live up to 300 years. That means his father was cut down right in the middle of his life, barely halfway through it. And standing across from him right now is the reason that happened, because Emu tricked Harold. Loki says it plainly. Emu is the one responsible for his father's death. Emu's response is cold. He says that the one who suffered most from that whole inconvenience was him, meaning Emu. He's not even acknowledging Harold's death as a real loss. He's framing it as an inconvenience that affected him personally. That's enough. Loki is done talking. Supreme King Haki starts erupting off of him and his weapon. The air around Ragnir starts cracking. He remembers his father's final moments, how he didn't care at all about his own life, saying that all that mattered was Elbaf's future. Loki recalls how he died with a smile in his last moments. And now, in the present, he is going to take his revenge for all of that. He charges the hammer with a massive bolt of lightning on top of the Haki and brings it down on Emu with everything he has. The technique is called Ragna Izuchi, Ragnarok, combined with Ikazuchi, which is Japanese for lightning. This is Loki going all in from the very first exchange. Emu doesn't flinch. Their Omen ability activates. Black flames manifest around them in a shape that almost looks like a demon's face, and they throw it up as a wall directly against the strike. Ragnir's lightning hammer hits the black flames and stops dead. The attack goes nowhere. The clash produces a shockwave that radiates outward across the entire island of Elbaf. We cut away briefly to see the damage. Bonnie is there, and she's most likely holding Sanji, who's still out from the previous chapter. Lilith is beside them. The shockwave hits their location. Then we see it reach further. Jinbei, Nami, and Frankie's area gets rocked by the same ripple. The fight between these two beings is so large in scale that the whole island is feeling it. Back to Loki. He's visibly shaken. Not panicking, but he's thrown off because his lightning strike, his Supreme King Haki, his most powerful opener, was just absorbed. He asks Emu what that power is. What are those black flames exactly? Emu doesn't explain verbally, they demonstrate. Emu uses the Omen ability to inflate their right arm. The way it's drawn, the arm swelling with that black energy pushing outward. It looks almost exactly like how Luffy inflates his limbs in Gear 3rd or Gear 5th. It reads like a dark reflection of Luffy. And the result of this inflation is that Emu's entire body grows. He gigantifies himself, scaling upward until he's standing at nearly the same height as Loki, who again is an ancient giant. And Emu explains it simply: Omen is his military might. That's what it is. So Emu went from a large human to the size of one of the biggest living beings on the planet by simply pumping his own power through his body. He also uses those same black flames on his weapon, shifting its size and shape. Their spear clashes directly with Loki's hammer, another shockwave detonates between them. But Emu doesn't give Loki a second to breathe or adjust. Immediately after the weapon clash, before Loki can recover his footing, Emu is already gone. He flies around behind Loki in an instant, completely blindsiding him, and then he reshapes his weapon one more time. The black morning star he's been using transforms. It becomes a massive black sword. Emu names the attack Nemesis, the blade of divine punishment. For context, Nemesis, in Greek mythology, is the goddess of retribution, and she's also the daughter of Nyx, the goddess of night. The sword's design is immediately recognizable. It looks almost identical to Yoru, Mihawk's black blade, one of the 12 supreme grade swords in the world. And Emu doesn't just have a sword that looks like Mihawk's, he uses it the exact same way. The attack pattern, the strike angle, it's Mihawk's signature method, executed with a blade born from black flames. Nemesis goes straight through Loki's chest. Loki is on the ground. He's been impaled by a sword the size of a building, through the chest, but he starts pulling himself back up, because of course he does. And Emu, rather than pressing the attack, takes this moment to talk. He lays out his entire philosophy. He says it is the nature of mankind to always crave strength. That's just how humans are. But when that craving pushes someone to seek power through shortcuts, that becomes corruption. When someone chooses servitude out of pure self-interest, submitting to someone stronger in exchange for protection or benefit, that's a covenant. And the envy that keeps someone reaching upward, always grasping for what the strong already have, that desire can be channeled into what Emu calls the power of Omen. These three things together, corruption, covenant, and Omen, are the foundation of domination. That's what Emu believes the world runs on, and that's what he's built. While he's in the middle of explaining this, Loki tries to strike him again. Emu fires a ball of black flames at him point blank. It connects. Loki takes the hit and stumbles. Then Emu makes an offer. He tells Loki he can give him the power of a god, strength that goes far beyond anything anyone else possesses. Loki refuses. He picks up Ragnir and brings it down on Emu again. Emu doesn't even flinch. Loki is exhausted. He takes a moment, sits down briefly just to catch his breath. And from that position, he answers Emu's whole pitch. He says the power Emu is describing, this offer of godly strength, looks a lot more like making a deal with a devil than anything holy. Emu's response is one line, and it's delivered without any urgency at all. He says there's no real difference between a god and a devil. Loki gets back up. He says he's not going to become someone else's puppet. He refuses to be a person who lives under someone else's domination. He readies another attack. Emu cuts him off, and the line he delivers next is what triggers the flashback. He says, "Domination is the only true source of happiness in the world." And then we're in the past. Emu and Joy Boy. Both of them shown as silhouettes. Neither face is fully visible, but the scene itself is clear. These two were not enemies. Joy Boy is laughing. He's speaking to Emu, and there's no tension in it, no hostility, just genuine warmth. From everything that Emu says and believes, that peace can only come through control and domination. You can feel the shape of the argument they must have had, because Joy Boy clearly must have believed the opposite. These weren't just small personal disagreements. These were two people with two completely opposite visions of what the world should be, and at some point, that gap became uncrossable. The flashback ends. In the present, Emu screams Joy Boy's name. It comes out as pure rage and grief. Supreme King Haki erupts from him as he shouts, "Isn't that right, Joy Boy?" It sounds like someone shouting at a person who's been gone for centuries and still hasn't answered. Whatever happened between them, it clearly wasn't resolved. It wasn't clean. And 800 years later, Emu is still furious about it. We cut away to the Walrus School. Luffy is still there, still eating. He felt Emu's haki roll through him, and he describes it as suffocating, unlike anything he's ever sensed before in his life. He knows he cannot step into that fight without being completely full, completely recovered, so he is eating as fast as he physically can, shoveling food down to get back to 100%. Back at the battlefield, Emu is still caught in that moment, that memory of Joy Boy, and Loki notices. He calls it out directly. He tells Emu that he's been drifting off in the middle of a fight, that he's been underestimating him this whole time, and he uses that window. He swings Ragnir and connects, sending Emu flying backward into the treasure tree atom. Emu gets embedded into it from the force of the impact. Loki doesn't stop. Before Emu can even react, he transforms. His beast form activates, the Nidhogg. And for just a moment, even Emu looks shaken by it. Emu actually starts shifting into an Omen stance in response, like they're about to need it. Loki opens his jaws and fires Thorheim directly at Emu. This is his biggest, widest, most destructive attack. Emu takes it. And when the smoke clears, Emu is smiling, a fearless smile. Emu looks outward, at something, or someone, we can't see, and quietly says, "So you have returned." That's where the chapter ends. The chapter opens right in the middle of the battle between Loki and Emu, with the massive presence of Nidhogg still looming over the battlefield. Loki notes that he can still feel Emu's presence, but that he is simply too enormous to track him properly. There's heavy breathing on the panel, the kind that tells you Emu took a real hit from Loki's Thorheim last chapter. Emu speaks through labored coughs. "To think we'd meet again in this world," and then drops the bombshell. He calls Nidhogg a traitor, straight up. This dragon, this mythical beast that Loki wields, apparently has a history with Emu that goes all the way back 800 years. Snow and lightning begin falling. Emu takes notice of the snow coming down, and right here, Emu acknowledges the synergy between Loki and Ragnir, the explanation being that thunder is born from the collision of ice. Loki's natural lightning ability and Ragnir's ice power working together in perfect harmony. The compatibility between those two, as stated in the chapter, was outstanding. And then we get the big reveal on Ragnir itself. Ragnir is not just a weapon, it is a devil fruit user. More specifically, the hammer's proper name is Tetsurai, and it consumed the mythical Zoan squirrel fruit model, Ice Squirrel, based on Ratatoskr. The squirrel from Norse mythology that runs up and down the world tree Yggdrasil, carrying messages between realms. Emu speaks to the hammer in a nostalgic tone, recalling how, back then, Ragnir was waiting for a new master. It is evident that a deeply rooted history exists between them. Loki is done with the talking. He launches an attack called Ragna 5 Arrows. 5 arrows of combined ice and lightning, firing out from Ragnir in one clean barrage. Emu counters with a named technique of his own, Tsitsimitl. This one is pulled straight from Aztec mythology. Tsitsimitl refers to a skeletal star goddess associated with demons, a figure that commands darkness and works directly against the sun. Emu then follows up with bombardment, and then eclipse, dark shadow-like spirit heads that pour out and start crashing into the forest, into Nidhogg, into everything around them. The pages are just wall-to-wall destruction, multiple eclipse heads tearing through the battlefield all at once. And notably, Nidhogg is just tanking all of it. We now cut away from the battlefield and check in on Lilith and Bonnie. Bonnie is watching the fight from a distance, and she is scared, flat out scared. Lilith calls her back. Bonnie replies that she is absolutely not getting anywhere near whatever Emu is throwing around. No way is she fighting that. Lilith tells her that's exactly right. It's her job right now to look after Bonnie, and she won't let anything happen to her. But even as she says that, Lilith is wondering out loud, who even is this mysterious figure they're dealing with? Sanji is nearby as well. clearly roughed up from taking hits from Emu in the previous exchange. Lilith comments on it. She notes that whoever this opponent is, they clearly aren't one of the 5 elders. There's something deeper within the structure of this old organization. Power struggles within something that old naturally produce darker, hidden layers of hierarchy. Bonnie calls out to Sanji, telling him he's heavily injured and needs to stop. But Sanji is not stopping. Here the chapter gives us a brief flashback to Killingham. We see him laughing right after receiving the Omen power-up from Emu, taunting Sanji, telling him he doesn't even need to bother with him anymore. Killingham even points out he can't believe Sanji is even still standing with those injuries, calling it straight up abnormal that he's alive. As Killingham turns to leave, Sanji asks where he's going. Killingham replies that he's going to finish the mission he came to Elbaf for, and he tells Sanji to just sit there and observe the power he's just been given. Then Killingham leaps, and it is a massive, blindingly fast jump. The Omen has buffed the Holy Knights into a completely different league entirely. It's comparable to what the Super Vega Cola did for Frankie, that kind of sudden, drastic, game-changing power jump. Back in the present, Sanji knows he cannot afford to let Killingham move freely. With the Holy Knights at this new level, Elbaf is in real danger, and he knows they're going to continue their original mission of kidnapping the children. He says he won't let everything they've fought for up to this point go to waste. He calls Elbaf the country that Luffy and Usopp have always admired, and says flat out that protecting it is his personal duty. Then he leaps, pushing through every injury, chasing after Killingham before it's too late. We now shift to the Library of Rakuro, the Owl Library. Specifically, an underground passage leading to a back door that Robin and Saul have found. And behind that back door is a hidden room absolutely filled with books. Books that should have burned in the fire that ravaged the library. Robin is visibly stunned. She says she thought everything had been lost, but she's grateful that Biblo, the owl, saved all of this knowledge. He protected every single book from the flames. Saul, in his warm, giant way, starts expressing deep gratitude. But there's something about Biblo that Saul seems to find more mysterious now than before, like there is clearly more to this owl than he initially understood. Quick scene cut, we move to the Lake of Sea Clouds near the West Village, and this is where we get our first real display of what the Omen has physically done to Summers. Saint Shepard Summers is out here maneuvering a massive giant's ship, essentially on his own, just carrying it. He picks up the transponder snail and contacts Killingham, first identifying himself as Summers, then immediately correcting it to Super Summers. He lets Killingham know he's found a suitable giant's ship and tells him to bring the children to the port within 5 minutes. Now we're inside the West Village Tavern. Things are settling down from the earlier fighting. Chopper is doing what Chopper does, treating the wounded. Gerd had her fingers severed by Emu last chapter, and the good news is that Chopper says the cut was so precise and clean that the fingers should reattach, but it will take months to fully heal. Gerd feels completely useless about the whole situation. She says she should be the one out there treating everyone else. Chopper tells her not to be so hard on herself. There is a genuinely warm moment where the villagers thank Dr. Chopper for treating their mothers. Chopper says it is just first aid, and that he will give proper treatment once the crisis is over. Nearby, Hadruddin is laid out with bandages covering his body, unconscious from Emu's earlier attack. Stanson is sitting quietly beside him. Meanwhile, Road is having a whole moment. He says out loud that he cannot believe his idol's finger got severed, and then he volunteers his own fingers as a donor if she needs one. Gerd shuts that down immediately. Road calls her cold, but says that even her coldness toward him is something he is genuinely grateful for in these trying times. And then Gerd gives him something real. She says she has newfound respect for Road after seeing him risk his own life to protect his younger brother Bjorn. The moment those words land, Road gets an immediate nosebleed, like the full otaku simp he is. Bjorn watches the whole thing unfold from nearby, shakes his head, and says he was just starting to think highly of his brother. Meanwhile, near the western port, Goldberg is running with Zoro on his shoulders. Zoro apologizes, remarking that without a giant's stride, this country is far too enormous to cross on foot. Goldberg waves it off and points out that within the crew, he is the only one who came through without any major wounds. Then he thanks Zoro, saying they are lucky to have someone like him fighting alongside them in Elbaf's crisis. Zoro tells him not to worry about it. Their captain's motto is that his friend's country is his country. Goldberg says he can now see exactly why Hadrudin pledged himself to Luffy. Zoro then shifts the conversation to Emu's power, the Omen, the black flames. He brings up how those flames transformed into steel bullets and bombs mid-attack. The read from both of them is the same: the God's Knights have powered up hard, and if they don't land finishing blows soon, things are going to get very difficult very fast. Now we move to the ports of the West Village, the most intense sequence of the chapter. Killingham is at the port and he is shaken. He tells Summers that he has accidentally summoned something unbelievable, something he did not intend to call out. Summers reacts immediately with disbelief. Killingham admits he got carried away and accidentally summoned the thing he fears most. Summers calls him a flat-out idiot. He points out that even they, the Holy Knights themselves, are scared of whatever this thing is, and demands to know if Killingham can even control it. Killingham replies that, well, it is an MMA, so probably, but what is done, and he tells Summers to hurry because they are running out of time. Then Killingham asks about Gunko's whereabouts. Summers replies that he saw her on the way to the port, and that she looked dead to him. Killingham goes quiet in shock. Summers then redirects the conversation. He notes that Emu's body is fundamentally one that cannot remain outside for long. But the fact that Emu pushed past that limitation entirely means that both necessary power and power that must be immediately erased are present here, right now. He tells Killingham not to disappoint the Great One and to meet expectations. Killingham says, of course. Back in the Western Village, the rain starts. A sudden heavy downpour hits out of nowhere. The villagers are confused at first, then it starts flooding indoors. People shout not to let the injured get wet. And then Killingham gives the order, capture all the children from the village. Immediately, a massive, watery, transparent hand reaches directly into the village house, where all the injured are sheltered. The hand grabs some of the children. The children scream, being pulled into and submerged within this giant watery grip. The villagers watch in complete horror as the hand drags the children away. And then Killingham delivers the lore. He reflects, for people like him, for the celestial dragons, born in a land higher than the rain clouds, water falling from the sky is nothing but terror. He says that alongside the D-Clan and Nika, this figure was one he heard about often, growing up as a cautionary tale. They say in the lower world there is a monster called the Rain God, one who pours water directly over your head. It appears riding the rhythm of the rain dance. The Rain God, Zaza. The chapter gives her a full introduction. Rain God Zaza, manifested through Killingham's MMA ability, pulled directly from his own nightmares. His deepest fear given physical form. She is described as a monstrous deity from the lower world. Her design is genuinely striking. A tall, long-haired woman with 4 arms. Her body is completely transparent and filled entirely with water. She wears a veil and a jeweled cone hat, with a white ring floating behind her, notably similar to the Hagoromo scarves seen on awakened mythical Zoan users. She rides in on the rhythm of the rain prayer, and the moment the villagers lay eyes on her, screaming erupts everywhere. The flooding is immediate and catastrophic, the entire village going under all at once. Some extra context worth knowing: the name Zaza is an onomatopoeia for the sound of heavy rain in Japanese, which fits perfectly with how this world names things. And this name goes further back. Zaza was first referenced all the way back in chapter 287 during the Skypiea arc, over 800 chapters ago, 20 years in real time. The flooding chaos snaps everything into motion. Killingham calls out that he is taking the children and tells Summers to get ready. Summers says they can set sail at any time. Goldberg notices the commotion erupting in the village and asks Zoro if something is wrong and whether they should head back. But before anything else, Zoro spots Sanji arriving toward the village at speed. He tells Goldberg, no, it is fine, because Sanji is already on it. Both of them are battered. They both took real damage from Emu, but neither of them is anywhere close to done. And even showing up to the same crisis at the same time, Zoro and Sanji still manage to bicker with each other. Zoro yelling at Sanji to do it properly, Sanji screaming the exact same thing right back at him. Classic. These two are setting up for their final matchups: Zoro against Summers, Sanji against Killingham. The race to save Elbaf is on. And that is where chapter 1182 ends. Alright guys, that was part 5 of the entire Elbaf explanation. Part 6 will be arriving after a handful of new chapters are released, just like always. Thank you all for watching. I genuinely appreciate every single one of you for sticking around until the end.